In this video, I would focus on explaining data collection procedure in research methodology. Data collection procedure. Okay, now what is data collection procedure? Data collection procedure explains the systematic steps and processes undertaken by researchers to gather data from respondents using the chosen data collection tool. Now, data collection procedure usually comes after data collection tools or data collection instruments. Okay, so now after you've designed your data collection instrument, now the reason why you are designing the instrument is to collect data from the respondents. Now, the processes and the procedure that you are going to follow to use the data collection tool to gather information or collect information or data from your respondent or your participant, that is what we call data collection procedure. Is that okay? Now, typically, data collection procedure outlines how, the where, and the when data were collected. Okay, ensuring the process is transparent, the process is ethical, and the process is replicable. Okay, now, description in academic research. How do you have to describe? What processes do you have to observe when you want to describe the data collection procedure? Because in a typical research paper, in the methodology section, you have to describe the data collection procedure step by step. But then there is a guide, there is a format you should observe. Okay, so in this video, I'm going to explain, in a typical research, academic research paper, how are you supposed to write the data collection procedure, describe the data collection procedure. Okay, now in an academic research, this section basically provides a comprehensive account of how data were gathered and measures that were taken and the measures taken to ensure quality, measures taken to ensure accuracy, and measures taken to ensure ethical compliance. Now, when you are describing data collection procedure, one key thing you have to concentrate on, you have to observe, you have to make sure you've explained properly is ethical clearance. Ethical clearance. Okay, now let's look at how you can describe what key areas should you consider when you are describing data collection procedure. Now, the first area you have to consider is introductory letter and permission. Introductory letter and permission. Now, in describing your data collection procedure, now remember that data collection procedure is a practical thing. It's practical, just that you have to describe it in theory and write it under your methodology. But it's a practical procedure. Okay, good. The first thing or the first area you need to consider is introductory letter and permission. Usually, an introductory letter from the researcher's department. So, for example, you are a student, you are writing a proposal, an actual project work. Under the data collection procedure, you have to mention that you receive an introductory letter. Introductory letter is more like a letter that confirms that you've been granted the permission to conduct usually within an introductory letter is a letter that confirms that you've met all the procedures that is required for you to undertake an actual project, including, writing of a proposal and all that, and that you've been given permission by the school or the department that you belong to, whichever institution that you belong to, you've been given permission, okay, in your institution, okay, you've obtained permission from your institution and other relevant authorities to conduct the study. Okay, again, you would also need a permission letter from the facility. Okay, so in describing the data collection procedure, you have to also talk about the fact that you have received or obtained permission from relevant authorities within the facility or at the hospital that you are conducting the study. You've been given the permission. Is that okay? Usually for community-based studies, it is submitted to the local or community leaders for approval. So when you take the introductory letter from your school or your department, you submit the introductory letter to the hospital or to the school or to the community authorities or community leaders or district authorities for approval. You don't take the introductory letter from your school and you keep it there. You receive the introductory letter from your school then, or your department where you are practicing, or where you are studying, or you are under training, then you submit it to the authorities in the institution you are going to conduct the study sites, the authorities in charge, the administrative authorities, for approval or for permission to conduct the study. Usually in describing data collection procedure, that's the first step. Introductory letter from your training institution or your department or the institution you belong to. Then after taking the introductory letter from the institution, you submit the introductory letter to the study site administrative authorities for permission or for approval. Okay, this is the process. Now, if it is a community-based study that you are conducting, then you have to submit the introductory letter to the community authorities or district authorities or wherever authorities for them to give you permission or approval to conduct the study. Now, another area you have to also consider in describing the data collection procedure, which is very key. In fact, all these areas I'm pointing, you can't omit them when you are describing data collection procedure. Now, the second point is the ethical considerations. Okay, so in describing data collection procedure, you have to be able to talk about the fact that all ethical standards and protocols were strictly observed. Again, you have to talk about approval and authorizations were obtained from Institutional Review Board, okay, IRB, okay, Facility Ethics Committee, community authorities before data collection began. Now, more importantly, you have to talk about participants' right to confidentiality, anonymity, voluntary participation were ensured throughout the process. So you see, data collection procedure, is something that is practical in research methodology. You have to narrate. Usually you start from you taking introductory letter from your school. Okay, you submit, you have to let us know you submitted the introductory letter to the institution, the management of the institution. If some institutions have research committees or research departments, and usually you have to let us know which office you submitted the introductory letter to, or which office gave you the approval. Now, some institutions may be under institutional review boards. Do you get it? Yes, for example, if you're in Ghana, you want to conduct a study in district hospitals, polyclinics, most of them are under institutional review board. So sometimes they may refer you to go and apply for ethics at the institutional review board. Then after getting the ethics, you submit the ethical letter, a copy of it, to the institution for, permission. Do you get it? Yes, you go through certain processes. You have to describe all that process within your data collection procedure. Then again, you have to talk about you seeking consent even from the participants. After you've gotten approval from the authorities or from the administrative body of the institution, you have to let us know participant right to confidentiality were all explained. You sorted consents from the participants. You have to let us know all that process. You have to talk about all that. Is that okay? Great. So participant right to confidentiality, anonymity, voluntary participation were ensured throughout the process. All these have to be explained. Okay, you have to explain all this when you are, describing the data collection procedure. Okay, so remember, data collection procedure is a practical thing that you have to do. Just that you are required to write it, to draft it, okay, within your methodology section in a proposal or in research, the actual project work or a thesis. Is that okay? So it's a practical step. But more importantly, two things are very important: introductory letter and permission. Okay, and then the ethical consideration. And the ethical consideration, you have to talk about all ethical standards and protocols were strictly observed. Approval and authorization were obtained. If you obtained any approval or authorization from an institutional review board or any institutional review board, you have to let us know under the data collection procedure section. Let's look at the sample of data collection procedure. Now, the data collection procedure for this study, this is a sample. The data collection procedure for this study involved administering a structured questionnaire to patients attending the orthopedic clinic at Kolebu Teaching Hospital during the study period. Now, prior to the data collection, an introductory letter from the Department of Nursing, Central University, was submitted to the hospital administration to obtain permission to conduct the study. Now, ethical approval was also sought, and all relevant ethical considerations such as confidentiality, voluntary participation, and informed consent were strictly observed. Now, a convenient sampling technique was employed to recruit eligible participants who met the inclusion criteria. Patients who had completed their consultation or treatment sections were approached, and the purpose of the study were clearly explained to them. Those who voluntarily agreed to participate signed a written consent form before data collection commenced. The questionnaire was self-administered and designed to collect quantitative data relevant to the study objectives. Participants were guided on how to complete the questionnaire, and assistance was provided when necessary to ensure clarity and accuracy. Completed questionnaire were collected immediately after the completion to maintain a high response rate. When necessary, research assistants were engaged and trained on the objectives of the study, ethical principles, and procedures for questionnaire administration to ensure uniformity and reliability during the data collection. Now, the entire process was supervised by the researcher to ensure completeness and consistency of the responses. Now, data were checked for accuracy, coded, and prepared for statistical analysis. Throughout the process, participant privacy and confidentiality were maintained, and data were stored securely. The study aimed to collect reliable quantitative data on patient waiting times, satisfaction levels, and their interrelationships, providing insight into the quality of service delivery at the orthopedic clinic. So you see, first of all, within their first construct, they talk about the fact that ethical approval was sought, and all relevant ethical considerations such as confidentiality, voluntary participation, and informed consent were strictly observed. Okay, so let's take some. You see, prior to the data collection, so they are telling us that before they started the data collection, prior to the data collection, an introductory letter from the Department of Nursing, Central University, was submitted to the hospital administration to obtain. So you see, they are talking about introductory letter that they obtained from the university, their department, and submitted to the hospital administration to obtain permission to conduct the study. Then they went further to tell us that ethical approval was sought, and all relevant ethical considerations such as confidentiality, voluntary participation, and informed consent were strictly observed. Is that okay? Now, within the data collection procedure, another thing you should remember is that you have to even let us know, okay, the type of sampling technique that you use. So you see, they go further to tell us that a convenient sampling technique was employed to recruit eligible participants who met the inclusion criteria. Now, patients who had completed their consultation or treatment sections were approached, and the purpose of the study was clearly explained to them. Now, those who voluntarily agreed to participate signed a written consent form before the data collection commenced. Now, the questionnaire was self-administered and designed to collect quantitative data relevant to the study objectives. Participants were guided on how to complete the questionnaire, and assistance was provided when necessary to ensure clarity and accuracy. Completed questionnaires were collected immediately after completion to maintain higher response rates. Where necessary, research assistants were engaged and trained on the objectives of the study. Ethical principles and procedures for questionnaire administration to ensure uniformity and reliability during the data collection. The entire process was supervised by the researcher to ensure completeness and consistency of the responses. Now, data collected were checked for accuracy, coded, and prepared for statistical analysis. Throughout the process, participants' privacy and confidentiality were maintained, and data were stored securely. The study aimed to collect reliable quantitative data on patient waiting times, satisfaction levels, and their interrelationship, providing insights into the quality of service delivery at the orthopedic clinic. So you see, this is very beautiful. This is a typical sample of how you should write the data collection procedure. In summary, so you see, data collection procedure basically explains the systematic steps and the processes undertaken by the researcher to gather data from the respondents. Now, so all the processes, including getting introductory letter from your institution or your department, through to submitting the introductory letter to the various institution or the institution you are conducting the study for approval, okay, obtaining informed consent from the participants, the sampling technique that you use, whether you use probability sampling, non-probability sampling, you have to specify and explain the type of probability sampling. That is, if you use probability sampling, you have to specify and explain the type of non-probability sampling. That is, if you use non-probability sampling, and you even have to give us justification why your study you considered non-probability sampling. Now, there are times that if you trained research assistants, you have to let us know the training, what went into the training, the duration of the training. You get the kind of training that you gave them. All that have to be detailed in the data collection procedure. Is that okay? So the data collection procedure, is a practical thing that you should understand. It's something that is very practical. It's a field work. Is that okay? And so you should take your time to explain it systematically, step by step, and give, relevant details so that, readers, and you see, especially in scientific researches, like health system researches, data collection, like experimental studies, the data collection procedure is very important. And a lot of reviewers may pay attention a lot to your data collection procedure. Is that okay? It's very, very, very important. And if your data collection procedure is not explained, because readers or your audience were not there. So if data collection procedure is not explained practically to make it real, for people to be able to understand, we may not believe, the data that you have. Is that okay? Great. So it should be transparent. The process have to be transparent and it should be very detailed. Is that okay? All right. So this brings us to the end of this video on data collection procedure. Kindly support the channel by clicking on the like button. Do well to share this video or content on this channel to your colleagues in other institutions. We may find this content or information very useful. If you know someone doing a project work, writing a proposal, a thesis, at all levels, make sure you share this video to assist them. All the best. Catch you in the next video.